Hello, Bobby Torres of Frightbox recording here to give you my top 10 reasons why amp sims are way better than real amps. And also, if you're one of these purists that's dead set on using real amps, you'll learn in this video while you're probably wasting your time. Let's dive into it. All right, so without any further ado, let's dive into the 10 reasons why I believe amp sims are actually way better than real tube amps. Reason number one is simple. Tube amps are friggin' loud. Now, when you're recording at home, or even if you're recording in a pro studio that might be adjacent to a living space or an apartment building or a store or a house, amps are extremely loud. Now, yes, people tell me all the time, well, you could turn your tube amp down while you record, but as you probably know, tube amps sound great when they are cranked, which isn't really that convenient. Amp sims sound awesome, obviously at any volume. You could track with headphones, and the only thing that's making noise are the strings on your guitar or bass. So that's reason number one. Tube amps are loud, and amp sims are not loud. Reason number two why tube amps are not as good as amp sims. And it comes down to maintenance. Tube amps require maintenance. Tubes don't last forever. Pots get scratchy. Trust me, I know from experience. I've had so many sessions that ended up coming to a grinding halt because the amp has gone down, something's weird with the tubes out of nowhere, the pots are scratchy, the volume changes in the middle of a take. Not convenient. And as you know, amps and plugins just work, as long as you don't have any computer issues. And this leads me to reason number three why amp sims are better than real tube amps. And that is tube amps require a lot of work to set up in the studio and a lot of time. When you're tracking DIs out of your home studio or a pro studio, really doesn't matter. You just take your guitar, plug it in, make sure the DI is clean and pure, and you can put it through any amp sim that you wish. But when it comes to recording live tube amps or real tube amps, or any amp for that matter, you have to mess with microphone placement, microphone selection, cab selection, room selection. Very, very time consuming. And this leads me to reason number four. Recording tube amps takes experience and skill. Now, if you've been recording for any length of time and you've experimented with recording your tube amp, specifically when it comes to heavy guitar tone, you probably know by now that it is not easy. You can have a tone that sounds amazing in the room, amazing at shows and in band rehearsal, that somehow magically sounds like complete crap the second you mic your cab with a microphone. And it's true. Yeah, miking tube amps is not easy. It's a skill in and of itself, and it's taken me close to a decade to get decent at it. You really have to know what to look out for. You have to understand microphone placement, microphone selection, cab selection. Believe me, it's infinitely more straightforward to pull up a great sounding preset in your favorite amp sim and just get straight to making music. Okay, and this leads me to reason number five why amp sims are better than tube amps. And this is the one that people always forget. You need both a great head and cab. Everyone focuses on the head and the pedals and the fancy overpriced guitar cable that's supposed to make your tone awesome and the pickups and all this stuff that really doesn't matter, when in reality, the large majority of your tone comes from your actual cab and the speakers within your cab and the microphone and the mic placement. So there are multiple things that have to be in place in order to capture a great live tube guitar tone. Just going out and buying a 5150 head or an orange head is not the answer. Believe me, if your cab is not up to snuff, you've just wasted your money. Again, I know this from experience. Okay, and reason number six why tube amps are not as good as amp sims is that they slow the process of recording guitars down in the studio. I don't care if it's in a project studio or home studio or in a multi-million-dollar pro studio. I've been in so many sessions where we've spent so much time trying to dial in a great guitar tone with the guitar player's tone and amp that they must use, and it always brings the session to a screeching halt. Usually in cases where a guitar player is being stubborn and wants to use their amp. I've had this happen where guitar players want to use Saldanos, Diesels, really high-end tube amps that just aren't working for the production. It is so much easier to just track the DI through an amp sim and even choose the tone that you want later while you're mixing the project, even if the guitar player doesn't know about it. Because at the end of the day, if it sounds good, it is good. And guitar players often get hung up on the gear that they spent a lot of money on instead of listening with their ears. This is why I prefer to track DIs in the studio and just leave the amp out of the equation, for the most part. Okay, and reason number 7 why amp sims are better than tube amps is that tube amps take up a lot of physical space. Now, if you're recording metal, you probably want to track through either a 4x12 or a 2x12 at the very least. Go out, get yourself a 5150 and a Mesa Boogie oversized 4x12 or 2x12. That thing is going to take up a lot of room, which is not convenient when you're working in a tight space or room. Again, a laptop and the interface with a guitar cable, with the guitar plugged straight into the interface is so much more convenient than having this huge monstrosity that you're trying to record through in a cluttered environment. Okay, and this leads me to number 8, and that is if you're recording real amps, you need an ISO booth, room, or ISO cab. I don't know about you, but I've tried recording guitars with headphones with the amp blasting a few feet behind me, and it sucks. Again, tube amps are extremely loud, and it's very distracting if you're trying to track in the same room with the amp blasting right next to you. You really need to have a separate space, a room that's sort of isolated, or an ISO cab, which I'm not a fan of. They really don't sound right to me. I'd rather record a tube amp in a nice sounding room. That's how I've always achieved the best results. But not all of us have that luxury. Not all of us have that space. Again, amp sims are awesome. They sound just as real as tube amps. Anyone who tells you otherwise don't know what they're talking about. They're just purists. If you don't have the space, track through an amp sim. Okay, this leads me to number 9, why tube amps are not as good as amp sims. And that's because they're friggin' expensive. Tube amps are astronomically expensive. And they're getting to be more expensive recently, which is kind of insane. For example, my favorite tone to track through in the studio is a 5150 head through an oversized Mesa cab. And neither of those things are cheap. We're looking at least a $2,000 rig. Now, we're lucky enough to live in a day and age where you can achieve the exact same result, if you know what you're doing, in your computer for free with a free amp sim and a great impulse response. It will sound just as good as the real thing, believe me. I use both. They are interchangeable. It's just one is way more expensive and takes a lot more work, and one is a lot more convenient. I'll go the path of convenience. Thank you very much. Okay, and reason number 10, and this is something that people don't think about if they've not recorded in the studio and maybe they don't have a lot of experience, is that tube amps are very inconsistent. I've tracked so many records where on a Monday, the amp will sound one way, we don't touch the microphones, we don't touch anything, and on Tuesday and Wednesday, the amp sounds slightly darker or brighter. The reason why, I have no idea. Maybe it's the way that the tubes are wearing out. And the reason why, I have no idea. But I have definitely found this to be true. This doesn't always happen, but it happens enough to be a pain in the ass. And of course, we all know that amp sims are digital, so they are 1,000,000% consistent no matter what time you plug into your computer. Doesn't matter if you're plugging into the amp sim today or in 5 years from now. As long as it's the same amp sim and the same version, it's gonna sound the same. Definitely not the case with tube amps, even when they're well maintained. So there you have it. Those are 10 reasons why I think amp sims are better than tube amps in a practical sense. Now, I'm gonna be fully transparent here. I'm a guitar player, and it's true. When it comes to playing live or when you're playing with a band, nothing beats a real tube amp. The way that they respond to your pick attack, the way that they fill up a room, the sheer volume of tubes. In my opinion, digital amps are not quite there yet. But when it comes to production and recording and mixing, amp sims have sounded just as good as the real thing for many, many, many years. I've been using them for well over a decade. Even with the outdated amp sims, I've swapped out amp sims with tube amps when I've mixed projects, and guitar players can't even tell. As a matter of fact, I've had people say, "Oh, I love that guitar tone," and then when I tell them it's an amp sim, they're kind of bummed out, because that's how guitar players are. We are gearheads. And also, yes, I do record with tube amps from time to time. I love the process. I love the creativity behind it, but it takes a lot more work, and I am fully aware that it is not convenient. I enjoy the process again because I'm a recording engineer and I'm a guitar player. The large majority of my productions, I'm using AmpSims for all of the reasons that I've listed off in this video. Now, when it comes to audio production and achieving pro level results in your home studio, the problem with so many of us home studio owners is that we get hung up on the wrong details and we focus on the wrong things. And it really does hold so many of us back. The truth is, results don't come from gear. They come from your knowledge, skill, and workflow. Now, I want you to achieve better results with the gear you're currently using. And because of this, I'm offering you access right now for absolutely free to my exclusive training, 4 dead simple ways to massively improve your recordings and mixes. Now, in this training, you'll learn my #1 technique for prepping heavy guitar tracks that virtually mix themselves. You'll also learn how to create instantaneous clarity within the mix using only stock EQ plugins. You'll also learn how to take control over your levels so that instruments stop fighting with each other within the mix. And then finally, you'll learn how to craft radio-ready vocals using only stock plugins. Now, a word of warning, if you have the attention span of a squirrel, do not bother watching this training. The training is really in depth. It's almost an hour long, and it's meant for people who are really serious about improving their skills and the results that they're achieving. Most people just want to blame gear and watch YouTube videos on plugin reviews thinking that that's the answer. If that's you, again, don't watch the training. It's meant only for us serious folk. Now, I'm curious to know, do you use AmpSims or live tube amps? Are you one of these characters that's convinced that nothing can beat a tube amp in the studio and that AmpSims completely fall short, even though tons of pro records feature AmpSims and people just don't know it? But let me know if this is you. Don't be shy. Leave a comment below. It always generates an interesting dialogue. And until next time, drink that Spindrift.